Okay, NF Sudhim asks another couple of questions further down, asking if NBN, if it's worth spending an extra $1,000, or would have been worth $1,000 to get an upgrade from fibre to the node to fibre to the curb, and he also asks about whether it would have been good to allow people to upgrade generally while it was being rolled out. Now, the problem with upgrades is that there's a level of cost that somebody has to pay for. Typically it's been NBN when they roll out a technology, but obviously if you want to do an upgrade, there's a certain amount of cost in upgrading the whole infrastructure to get to the point where you can provide a fibre to the curb versus a fibre to the node service, or a fibre to the premises, come to that. So one of the biggest issues we've had in doing upgrades is that NBN have had this idea of an area upgrade. The problem is that that sort of infrastructure, if you like, to get there, just to even to turn on the first person is so expensive relative to the individual cost that that people have found when they do technology upgrades, and NBN have always said that they're only doing a cost recovery, i.e. it's only costing what it costs them. People have found that to do a fibre to the premises upgrade, and fibre to the curb is a very similar technology to fibre to the premises in terms of all the infrastructure to get to you. It's just that last bit that's a bit different. Is often many tens of thousands of dollars because of that initial infrastructure. You've got to run the fibre all the way from, not often from the node, actually even back further from the node, to get to that point. Now, once you've done that, if your neighbour wants to connect, it's cheap as, well, relatively speaking, a couple of $1,000s probably. And we've had a couple of goes at trying to get groups of people together, and there's a certain issue with doing that, where if you have a group of people together all say, hey, we want to do an upgrade, we'll all chip in, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000, and we'll all get an upgrade. Well, at some point, as you're trying to get people involved, somebody's going to realize, hold on a second, if I actually pull out of this group, I'm going to get the fibre up, get most of the stuff paid for, and I won't have to pay for it, and then I can do an upgrade later. And so what tends to happen is that these groups they form and then they disintegrate again. Now, we've had a couple of goes at this, one in particular with a bunch of businesses out at the airport in Launceston, and that's exactly what happened. Initially, a lot of people were interested, we came out with a price, a few people said, oh, that's too much, and then they pulled out, and then we suddenly found that the price for everybody else started going up because there were fewer people to divide that sort of infrastructure cost amongst. So the only real way of doing, and this is why it was such a shame that they didn't continue with the original technology, is when a whole area effectively is forced to get it, then those costs, which is the difference between fibre to the node and fibre to the premises, was notionally about $2,000, I believe. There's some question about how accurate those figures are, then, the only other way of doing it, and I believe a few councils have had a go at this, where they've actually just essentially paid for it out of their own funds, so ratepayers essentially, which is another way of effectively everybody is forced to pay for it, and then it gets divided. Now, the problem is, of course, is when you have a group of people, some will say, hey, I want the high speed, I want the fibre to the premises, but the guy next door, maybe elderly, may not really understand why on earth they want this stuff, and frankly they were quite happy with the ADSL network, and so they don't see any point in paying any money at all. And so then there's issues where the council can rightly be asked, well, why are you spending ratepayers' money on this sort of stuff? So it's a complicated issue, and I believe there have been very few area switches that have actually gone ahead. The only things that have gone ahead, we've done a few of them, is the full tech upgrade for an individual premises. We've had a few businesses do it. We've had some as cheap as sort of $3,000 or $4,000 if they were very lucky. They were close to where the distribution point was, but we've had some quotes that are just hundreds of thousands of dollars. due to distance and due to the fact that frankly they probably didn't have the gear in the exchange to support it. Okay,